This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. The following Care Lab podcast does not provide health or medical advice. All content is provided for information purposes only. Listeners are encouraged to speak with their healthcare provider for specific healthcare advice and are wholly responsible for the outcome of implementing any tips or information presented.
Hi.
We're here. Hi.
Hi, how's it going? It's not Friday today.
It's not Friday, and it feels like it because Monday feels so much more hectic.
Oh my gosh, yes, I have a few things that I'm supposed to get done today that probably won't get done, but I'm here talking to you for Care Lab, and that's, you know what? That's my number one today.
That is the most important thing. Yes.
Absolutely. How's it going? Did you have a good weekend?
I did have a good weekend. It went really fast, but the weather is getting better, and so it lends to better weekends, meaning like, oh, look how terrible my house looks. Let me actually get the leaves up that we should have got up during the fall so I can get ready to plant a garden.
Yeah, I did some outdoor work yesterday too. Mostly, this is embarrassing. I probably shouldn't share this, but my family just like leaves stuff outside.
Like the kids leave toys and stuff like that?
Like things just get left outside. And so and that shouldn't happen, but it does because we're imperfect human beings. So I did a lot of like picking up of things that shouldn't have been outside that were outside and then throwing some things out, because when you leave things outside
that are not outside appropriate,
those things get ruined.
Yes.
So, yeah. So sorry to the environment for my part in that. But it did feel nice to get things kind of cleaned up out there in preparation for like planting some new plants to replace the ones that died during the cold.
You want to know my little trick that helps me?
Yeah.
I love gardening. I have zero time for gardening. And so what I've been doing just a little bit every year I've been in this house is planting bulbs, so that I do it one time and then they just come up. And so we was outside this weekend. I was like getting some stuff up because I seen some stuff starting to show up, and it just like brought a lot of cheer to our day because we saw our plants start to grow.
What kind of flower bulbs do you have? Like tulips and things? I love tulips.
I hate tulips, but
Why do you hate?
That's not true. I don't hate them.
It's like the Dutch are going to have a problem with this.
When I was a kid, we had this random patch of tulips, which I doubt my mom planted, so I don't know how they got there. But they would show up, and they'd be so beautiful in our yard because they came up early. And then, like, a day later, the squirrels would chop the heads off, and they'd be gone. And so that just made me sad. So I don't like tulips because everything likes tulips, and they eat them. And then you don't get to enjoy them and just see a stem with nothing on it. So I don't plant those. But
that is really sad. Okay, well, what do you plant that's more squirrel hardy?
I don't know.
You don't know? You just go and get, okay, Brandy's Mystery Garden,
it's
everyone.
Brandy's Mystery Garden. I have
people just, do you have like a P.O. box or something? People can just start sending you their
Send me a random
bulbs too.
If they can withstand I forgot what my zone level is, but I'm in Missouri. If you can withstand that temperature, I'll plant it. It's fine. I will do it. I am so excited to welcome our guest, Ron Braun from Care Patrol. He is here because we have hard questions to ask and we want answers. But the most important thing is
you're going to get grilled today.
Good. Totally grilled.
This is going to be a negative experience for you. Thank you for coming.
Perfect way to start a Monday.
Exactly. Care Patrol is awesome, and he's a franchise owner there because they're like real estate agents for senior living. And so it's a free service for the families and the individuals looking for a place to live. But it's such a useful help because there's so many different ones, and they have different flavors and themes, and the way people interact is different. And Ron's brain holds all of that knowledge, and you get to have it all. So we wanted to bring you on because we're OTs that are always thinking about aging in place. However, we also know that doesn't always happen for forever, and it's not always possible for everybody. And we care lab it because we answer questions that our listeners have in ways that are useful for them. And so one of the questions that we always run into, I think, is when is it time to actually consider moving somewhere? And how should they go about that? So we wanted to punt that question to you, Ron. What are the things that you see that make it more evident in somebody's life that they might need to consider?
Well, I mean, if somebody's at any point, I mean, because, one of the main things we always try to tell people is better to plan and react. So if somebody is starting to think that it might be a possibility, that's really the best time to start. But for as far as signs, to look for, like even for family members to look for, or anybody else, and friends, or even you folks, if therapists, when you're going into somebody's home, some things to look for. I've got a handout that I've given to different therapists that go into homes, and I think the big thing is when you go into somebody's apartment or their house, and you can see that their daily life is set up to be within a grabber reach of their chair. So they've been sitting in their chair, or they might have some sort of assistance, or maybe they got a lift chair, but everything that they need for the day is within a reach of that chair. That they're not. You can kind of see that they're not thriving, and those are kind of good signs where they're not. They're putting off going to the restroom as long as they can, or maybe they're sitting on pads, or they're doing things that are just not really conducive to them. Enjoying their life at ther home, because they're kind of stuck in one spot and trying to do things there. Other things to look for is for signs for people is. When things are not being done, dishes not done, bills are laying around, mail's not being brought in, you can see people are just avoiding doing the things that are harder for somebody to do. So, those are kind of the signs that we look for. But I mean, as far as an individual, if you start to think that you might need that at some point, get started. If you have a plan in place, we've had people, where they fall and they go to rehab, and then while they're in rehab, they know they're not going to be able to go home, and then you've got to try to find this from home. So it's better to have a place in mind, or have some knowledge beforehand, even before you need it.
Ron, do you find that people call you? I mean, obviously the goal is to have people have a plan in place as much as possible so that they are being proactive versus reactive. But do you find that most of the time people call you in a reactive situation where maybe things have already started to go off the rails a little bit and it's become like
there's probably more reactive than proactive. People tend to put that off. They kind of get in a little bit of denial as far as what when it's going to be appropriate, whether or not they should be at home alone, or whether or not they should be getting some care brought in, or what have you. But yeah, there's probably more reactive than really being proactive. A few people are thinking, oh, we should get dad or mom in a situation, now because they need it. And most of that doesn't happen as much as we probably would hope, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are, like, when you think about planning ahead, what are some ways that people can actually do that? Because when I think about kind of that side of the equation, not as a healthcare provider, not from the medical perspective, but just as like a daughter who might have to do this someday, what can people actually do to plan ahead from the perspective of finding the right community or the right place for
finding the right spot? Yeah.
So what are some kind of tips?
I think, the biggest thing that people can do to to plan for that is, number one, you don't really know. There's a lot of different levels of senior living that are available to people. And so it might be, and I hear a lot of people say, well, I can't afford that. And you ask them, well, how much is it?
Mhm.
And then they will say, well, I don't know. Well, then how do you know that you can't afford it if you don't know the other side of the equation? So understanding what care needs, sitting down with a placement professional, and try to, what we do. We spend a lot of time with people before we go anywhere. We just try to understand what people, what their background is, what they would like to do, what their care needs are now, or what they could be in the future. I mean, somebody, obviously we don't have a crystal ball, but somebody with Parkinson's today, just early stages of Parkinson's, is going to need more care likely in a year or two than they will now. And so you try to plan for, well, what kind of things are available out there. Part of it, our biggest thing is really just the education and helping people understand that what's available. People still mix up nursing home and assisted living a lot. They think, people's mind's eye, they hear the term assisted living and they think, grandma's nursing home. They think something done, much more institutional, and that's not really what it is. And there can be a lot of things that people can get help with, to help them through that, and just understanding that where the costs are, what's available. There are resources available, even from financial resources, a lot of times that people aren't aware of. There's veterans benefits for a lot of surviving spouses and things like that. So the biggest thing we can do to answer the question is really to get educated, and then probably the next about get educated what the needs are and what the capabilities of assisted living are, and then do a couple of tours. Because once you do a couple of tours, I've seen lots of people go, wow, this is not what I expected at all. I thought it was going to be much. This is just like living in an apartment. A lot of times you hear people saying, well, this is like a cruise on land. It's a lot better than what people think. And so yeah, that's really the biggest thing is get educated. What you can do to prepare is get educated.
So, Ron, what are some of the things, and I'm speaking now, not as like a healthcare provider or from the medical perspective, but like really truly as a daughter who might have to do this someday for her parents. What kinds of things can people actually do to plan ahead for this kind of situation from your perspective in the senior care placement world?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to just get some education on the overall system, what's available. There's a lot of people today still think when they hear the term assisted living, they think nursing home. Mm-hmm. And so that's not what assisted living means at all. Plus, there's also in Missouri, like in Missouri specifically, there are 4 license levels for assisted living. So what's available is very different than what people think. And at the highest level, there's a very high level of care that can be received or can be provided in an assisted living level 2 community that people may not be aware of. I've even heard some social workers thinking, well, you have to be able to walk out of the building. Well, that's not true. So learning more about what's available and what can be done is the biggest thing. Sitting down with somebody that understands what you need. What we do is we sit down, we learn about somebody's background. We learn about some of the things they like to do. I find that most communities they have a different kind of a vibe to them. Some are very active, some are not. Some are pretty laid back, and some have more of a country feel. We want to get to learn more about the senior to see what would be the good fit for them. So learning more about them, understanding what care needs they have today and what they may have in the future. If we don't have a crystal ball, but if somebody has Parkinson's now, then likely they're going to need more care in the future than what they will need now, right? So, and then the other thing too is, as part of the education, we have to talk a little bit about the financial part of things. There's money is never everything, but it's always a thing. So it's good to understand that. Brandy, earlier you used the analogy of being a realtor for senior living, and that's kind of we can use that over and over again. Is if you're searching for a house and you have a budget of 350,000, you don't want your realtor showing you something that's 600. That's just, that's not going to be, it's just going to be a waste of time for everybody. So we want to see something.
And you're going to be so disappointed when you see the house that's $350,000 as
exactly
opposed to the one that
after
was
you've seen the first
600.
one. All you're going to do is you take somebody and they think, oh wow, I can do this, and no, you can't. I just thought I'd make you feel bad for a while.
Right.
So so the best thing to do is get some education, understand what's the right level, and what kind of plan for the long term. Even if somebody doesn't have a lot of assets to work from, there's a lot that we can do to plan for the transition. So many people are, the big question people have is what's going to happen if I run out of money? And the answer is that likely people are going to end up on Medicaid. So we want to know, or Medicaid will pay for their where they live, and we need to understand that so that we can plan that transition as best as possible for each individual person. And the last thing to do is really get out and have a look at some places that could be appropriate, so that I used to, even in the previous life, we used to use the term FUD factor all the time. Kind of eliminate the FUD factor. Fear and uncertainty and doubt associated with any individual with any kind of change, but in this case, moving to a senior living environment.
Not the fun factor, the FUD factor.
FUD factor.
Okay, gotcha.
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We want to get rid of all of those things, so it's not such a stressful situation. So the more, and just like in almost any industry, the best way to reduce the FUD factor is education and learning more. So.
Hey there, it's Amelia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the Care Lab team, and here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
On that topic, because I have lots of questions about what you said, because that was all good. So tell us what the difference is in the different levels of care. So like on the one hand, you said how people hear senior living, they sometimes assume like nursing home level of care. When I've also experienced people wanting to move to assisted living and then feeling like they didn't get enough care there. And so I think the education piece along that is super important. So can you talk to us a little bit about like the key differences between the different levels of care, maybe even starting from like independent senior living?
Sure. I mean, on that, we talk about the continuum of care, kind of where people will live. So it generally starts people are living at home, and that's usually the most cost-effective way. What they're in their house, their apartment, they're not needing any assistance. But as they start to get need a little bit more help with certain things, they might have somebody from a private duty company come in. They can help with kind of some of the individual things for somebody to this are some of their cooking, cleaning, some bath aids, some things. I usually tell people that if you're looking for help to come into your home, whether it's in your home or in independent living, it's appropriate to bring in an external resource like a private duty company if you can plan the things that you need help with. Plan your care items. You can plan for medication management. You can plan for shower assistance a couple times a week. What you can't plan for is toileting or transferring. I mean, if you're falling and you need help getting up, or you need help getting to the bathroom, or you need help getting out of bed and getting into a chair, well, it's no longer appropriate for unless you're going to have somebody there around the clock, it's no longer appropriate to really bring a private duty company in. So the next step up from that then is, you can get all that in independent living. And one of the nice things about independent living, they take care of some of the basics, some of the things that are hard. for a lot of people, they don't want to cook anymore. It's hard to cook for one thing. So your nutrition gets a lot better if you enter independent living. They take care of some of the cleaning. They do housekeeping, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly or depending on the community. Meals are provided, and then one of the biggest aspects is they provide a lot of activities. So there's a lot of socialization going on when you're independent living. Many communities do what I call independent living plus, which means that instead of calling a care company to come in, which they usually have a 3-hour minimum to come and do a service at anybody's house, a lot of the communities have them resident in their community, so they can come in and they can do care on maybe 15-minute increments, so that you're not, even if you just need a couple of things, well, come by and do a shower assistance. Maybe that's half an hour to stand by while somebody takes a shower to make sure they don't fall. Well, if you do that at home and you're having somebody come to your house, you have to pay for 3 or 4 hours every time they come out. Where in your community you can do that. So that's what I call independent living plus, where you can get those planned services. The next step up from that is assisted living. I'll talk a little bit more about Missouri. That's what I'm familiar with. In Missouri, there's 4 types of assisted living. There's what they call a residential care facility level 1 and level 2, and then assisted living facility level 1 and level 2. The biggest difference between those 3 things is really one is whether or not you need a licensed nursing home administrator. For the lowest level, you do not need a licensed nursing home administrator. Everything else you do. So for an RCF2 and assisted living 1 and 2, you need an administrator. The next thing is really, it's about the care that you receive. It's going to be under the direction of a physician or a nursing staff with a house doctor, above the RCF1 level. And then the last thing, the biggest key, is all about mobility. And so in the mobility section, in an RCF, the lower levels, you have to be able to make a pathway to safety within 5 minutes on your own without assistance. In an assisted living level 1, you can make they can provide minimal assistance. They can do some queuing, or they can help you up a little bit, but you have to do most of it yourself and get out. In an assisted living level 2 community, they can provide full assistance, transfer assistance. They can wheel you out. They just have to document what's called an individualized evacuation plan for everybody that needs assistance to get out. So there's really no specific hard number on the number of IEPs that you can have in any one community, but you have to be able to show that you have enough staff to service all of your IEPs at any one time. So you have to show that at your lowest hour of, when your staffing levels are the lowest, that you have enough people to get on, and you have a plan to do things. Fred, you go with Bob, Bill, you go with Mary. You got to know what to do when that comes. And they do testing on that on a monthly basis to make sure that they can do it. So those are kind of the main things. Now, when I said when you can provide very high levels of care, there's really only about 4 at the highest level in assisted living level 2. There's only about 4 things that the state says that you can't do. One is, if you need assistance of more than one person for anything other than bathing or transferring, you're not appropriate for admission. So if you can do a 2-person transfer, you can do a 2-person assist in the shower, but anything else is all 1. But you can do it you can have somebody in assisted living with a 2-person transfer. So that's one of the key things.
What if you need 2 people for toileting? Because I've never been in a toileting situation where someone needed a 2-person assist for toileting and they didn't need 2 people 2-person assist for a transfer, and they didn't need 2 people for toileting, unless they're toileting at bed level, which then you could.
Well, and I think what they're doing there is the 2-person part is maybe they're transferring them from the chair to the toilet and then back again. That's where there's 2 people, and then whether or not they're so that part is 2 people. That they don't necessarily need 2 people for the actual toileting part.
Oh, you do. I say you do.
But yeah, that's something that's critical to look at then, to see whether or not you need but the license rules is 2 people for transferring and for bathing. It's not.
That's interesting.
Anything else.
That is an interesting line to draw, because it's hard to get to the toilet and stuff.
I mean, you can't have long-term specific skilled nursing needs. Like, you can't be on a feeding tube, or you can't have that sort of thing. Sometimes IVs can be, depending on how you're managing not the IV. You can have an IV. Sorry, I sort of meant to say a catheter. you can have a catheter, and sometimes you can, if the home health can come in and manage the changing of the catheter and the monitoring of the catheter, where the assisted living just has to empty it or something like that. That's possible. You can't be completely completely bedbound. I mean, if it's one that if you can do somebody, if you can't physically take somebody out of the bed, they can't be in assisted living. Because remember, in a hospital or a nursing home, most people are going to be in a hospital bed, and if necessary, the doors are wide enough where you can just wheel somebody out. Well, in assisted living, you're coming here with your own furniture, so you're not typically in a bed that can be removed. So if
that
you can't be
totally
taken out of
makes
bed,
sense.
you can't be in assisted living. You have to be able to transfer somebody, and with their transfer, they have to be able to assist them, and they participate, in their transfer, helping, with maybe a pivot and that sort of thing. And of course, you can't be a danger to yourself or others. If somebody is going to hurt somebody else or hurt themselves, then they're not going to be appropriate for assisted living either.
That is so interesting that they have all of those different like levels and distinctions. I'd be curious to know if that's the same. I mean, obviously every state is a little bit different. Thank you, federalism. But I'd be interested to hear what some of the differences are, because I'm sure there are some states where like assisted living is assisted living, and there's like maybe one or two, like maybe it's residential assisted living versus community-based assisted living, and there's a couple of different licensing chunks for that. But I think it's so interesting the way it's very detailed.
Yeah,
The
it's
way
it's very different.
parsed out.
There's a lot of places that have residential care homes, the homes that look just like a house in a neighborhood that's assisted living. We don't have that in Missouri. There is that in Kansas.
Yeah. Oh, we have a lot of that in Texas, actually.
In Texas, in Kansas, they have a lot of it as well. There's a lot of different little places out there where it's much more difficult to kind of keep track of which ones are good and which ones are bad when you have hundreds of them. And hundreds of them in any one little metro area. So yeah, you've got to know all those types of things. There's lots of all those. There are some states I've heard other my peers talk where you can't do a 2-person transfer. It's only you can, if you need a 2-person transfer, you can't be in their assisted living. So there's definitely differences, and you've got to really get to know the rules for each community. And then, well, those are what the state guidelines are, and then the way I always explain it to people, I say the state says you can go up to here, and then each community determines, I can go, this is how high I want to go. And some go right up to the level and some don't, even though they may have the same license level.
Yeah.
So it's our job to really know which ones will do what, or are willing to do what level of care, because getting back to what level of care somebody needs now and what level somebody needs in the future, we want to, as much as we possibly can, protect for the future as well.
I think this is such a good explanation too of why it's really important to have an advocate on your side as you do this. Like what you might do if you hadn't known that placement agencies existed is just like drive up to the one that's closest to your parents' house or something, and just go in and say, I want to do a tour, and this is the things that my mom is dealing with. And of course, there are motivations to say, yes, we can do it, right? And especially if you don't actually bring your mom, they don't see what their level is. And then you might get far down the pathway and then get to testing these things, and their license level doesn't match up to what her level of care needs are. And now you're kind of stuck because they're like, we actually can't accept her. And you didn't have the awareness to that. And so to be able to sift through that at the beginning so that you can know what places are going to be right for us to try to talk to first, and then narrow down from there, is such a value add at a time that's already really
and
stressful.
Even worse almost than saying, well, we're not going to be able to let your mom move in here now that we've seen her. We're not the appropriate community for her. Sometimes even worse is that we get somebody in and we didn't plan for the future, and they're really on the edge, and then they're there for a month, and they say, you're going to have to do this all over again and find something else different. And because we're not appropriate for you anymore, and we're going to have to give you notice, and you got to find a new place. So and that's just, every time we move, It's more and more stress on it's never easy to move. I mean, doesn't get easier just because you get older. It probably, in fact,
No.
it's going to get harder. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the big tough thing, is to make sure that you get a place that's where their care needs are gonna last for a while anyway.
I feel
Or the
like so
caregivability, I
often,
should say.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Ron. I was just gonna say, I feel like so often, you know, folks are having to make these decisions for their parents or for their loved ones, rather than maybe their loved one being able to be as active a participant as they would want them to be. Like, from my perspective as an occupational therapist, we always want to try to let people be as involved in their decision making and their care as much as they can, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about for this, I do have a question. I will get to the point, I promise. Brandy knows I take a while
It's a test.
sometimes.
It's a
Yeah,
listening skills test. You want to see
come
how
on.
long I can listen
Yeah,
and
wrap it up,
plan the
Amelia.
question.
But so I think that it's a hard conversation to have with someone maybe while they're able to have it, because if you say, hey, mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whoever it is that you're going to be maybe helping in the future, if you had to live somewhere, if you had to live not in your own home, what kind of thing would you want? The answer is probably going to be, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay in my
Exactly.
home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any tips for maybe asking that question in a way that's not so much like, what type of community would you want to be in, but like, what if you had to be somewhere, what would be important to you? Or, how would you give people advice on asking that question, so that if they're having to do that in the future, maybe they have already had some input at some point from the people whose lives are being so strongly affected by moving to a community.
Yeah, I mean, so there's certainly things to plan for that, and there's questions you can ask about the type of place that you'd want to be in. Try to make sure you understand it. I would say the thing that jumps up the most, one of the things that kind of hurts the most is helping people understand that, getting a power of attorney in place so that they can make decisions, so that they, not in a situation where they can't help. And I that doesn't, that I've seen a number of times where people want to move their parents in, and their parents are no longer in a position to make a competent decision,
Mm-hmm.
but they've never done any kind of that. If you can't make it, if you think somebody needs to have you know, a, if you're worried about their competency, then they're not competent enough to get a power to say who should be power of attorney, or make a decision of it. So getting that in place for anybody is really important to, overall. Understanding what people would like to do, and the things that when we start working with people, that it's already pretty evident that mom or dad maybe need some help, and but if they are their own person still, nobody can force them to do anything, and it's for their best thing. And a lot of times, some of the things that have worked the best as far as helping adult children kind of convince their mom or dad to do that is that they just I had one of our early clients who's sitting in the back of our car. We were driving them around. We were going to communities, and she said, I just want our life back. And she just wanted to get back to where she wasn't being just the full-time caregiver. She wanted to be a daughter again, and she wanted to have that for what time that her mom was going to have left. She wanted just to have mother-daughter time and have that, and focusing on that, and trying to help mom and dad understand that, because it's a difficult thing. I certainly don't like my kids telling me what to do, and I'm not going to like it anymore in 20 years. And but people also going to want to have that good relationship, and it's pretty easy. It's not that difficult to see how that relationship goes from a father daughter to a father son to a more caregiver caretaker and care receiver thing. And it's not what anybody really wants. And to try to really enjoy that, I mean, getting people to understand that, and knowing that the children are coming at it from a loving situation where they want that kind of relationship back with their parents rather than seeing them, struggle at home is important.
I like that. It's not just, I think a lot of times people feel guilty about looking for placement options for their loved ones that they're caring for because they feel like they should be doing it all, or it's their responsibility to make sure, that that it's all on them to take care of all
Right.
these needs. And the fact is, of course, that many times it's actually just not possible for
Sometimes it's
one
not possible. People
person.
are still working. And I actually heard somebody say something the other day I thought was pretty good. And I told him I was going to steal it. But um, he said that, somebody has always, multiple times people have told him, well, I'm never going to find a community that can take care of my parents as well as I can. And he said, well, I'm going to challenge that a little bit. He said, well, he's there's no doubt that you're never going to find a community that's going to be able to love your parents as much as you do. But the physical care and the medication management and the ongoing 7/24 actual care that he said, I think, there's a lot of many communities can do that better than you are, better than you can, because you're only one person. And here we've got a whole team that can do that. And then that allows you to come back and do the thing that you do the best, which is to be able to love them more. So I thought that was a good way to put it for him.
Care Lab listener, I have a question for you. If someone you love needed a caregiver, what qualities would you want that caregiver to have? You probably want them to be reliable, trustworthy, kind, maybe just a generally dependable and good person, right? Second question, would you also want them to be trained? I'm gonna guess the answer is a definite yes. Okay, third and final question for you. Do you think it matters who gives that training? Like, is it cool if it's just in your body, or would you want that person to be a qualified expert? Assuming you do, in fact, love this person who needs a caregiver, you probably want the expert, right? Well, that's what Higher Standards Caregiver Training does. Higher Standards Caregiver Training provides 100% occupational therapist-led training for caregivers. Caregivers get taught everything from gold standard foundational skills for transfers and daily living tasks, all the way up to how to deal with specific diseases and injuries. And most importantly, they are taught all of these things in a way that is practical and enhances the participation of the person who needs the care. And it actually protects the safety of everybody involved. Why? Because everyone deserves a higher standard. For a course for individuals or learning about training for care for organizations, find that information at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com.
Yeah, because it really, again, it reframes it from like, this is something that you have to feel guilty about to this is actually something that you can do that is going to improve the quality of the relationship and communication and the experience that you're able to have with your loved one and that they're able to have with you for the remaining part of their life. I mean, I think getting back to what you were talking about before, that loss of roles that you
Right.
have, right? When you go from being someone's spouse to being their spouse and their caregiver, that completely changes the dynamic of the relationship. Same for being someone's daughter or son versus being, again, their caregiver. It totally changes the dynamic of the
Totally
relationship.
changes how you feel about, oh, I got to go see dad. And then when I'm there, I've got to do this and this and this versus I get to go see dad and we're going to go do this. And, he's already taken care of, we're going to go for lunch. We're going to do this. We're going to a baseball game, whatever, going into assisted living doesn't mean you're locked in there. You can go in and out, as much as you want. But, a lot of times I tell people that, when you're moving into a community like that, what you're doing in some ways for the adult children that are, providing some of that care is you're exchanging quantity for quality. And so, you're going from a 7/24 relationship where you're there all the time and you see them continuously, to when you see them, then you've got really good quality time with them.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's just such a nice way to really, again, reframe that perspective from one of guilt to one of this is something that can really enhance the experience in life for everyone. I love that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is Maybe if you were as the 24/7 caregiver and then we decided to do senior living and you don't have to provide that care in that way, one way to redirect that energy is to just try to make space and time as effective as possible. And so that might be advocating for them in the place that they live in. It might be helping to encourage them to participate in activities so that they build a community where they're moving into. It might be going to do more stuff because you don't have to worry about the dressing and the bathing and the making sure something has been eaten. You can just show up literally right before it's time to go do the thing, which might be effortful too. Like getting out and going to an activity sometimes is an effort. And so for you to be able to be the one to take that on provides a lot of higher quality of life for that loved one because they get to still do those things, even though it takes maybe extra hands or time
Yeah,
or
I mean,
stuff.
it is very difficult to get out and do the social aspect of things when you're just at home. There's,
Hmm.
I've got a husband and wife, and they're the cutest things. They went and she's had dementia, and she was going into having trouble, and it just was too hard for him at home. And he told me they've been at the community they've been there for over a year now. He said that he has missed. There's been 2 days, I think, that he's missed where he hasn't been there to spend time with. He goes on all of their activities. He goes with them when they go out for, if they go out for a group dinner or whatever, he always gets to go too. And they go and they spend time together, and he's there playing bingo. And they can do time together, but then he can go home and he can decompress a little bit, and not be worried that he has to be the caregiver then too. Whereas they're getting a lot like that. So
Hmm.
it's, and especially in dementia is a good example too, because we talk about people are going to they start out and start having some dementia. They're going to have good days and they're going to have bad days. And, it's about taking advantage of the good days when they're available, when they're there, and then having some support when there's some bad days. And then as the disease progresses, and I know this from when my mom had dementia, you go from good days and bad days to good hours and bad hours throughout a day. And, being able to take advantage of that and not worrying so much about um, the other aspects, taking advantage of the time that you have available. That's really, really, that's priceless, really.
I'm glad you brought up dementia because you talked about home to independent living to assisted living. But what are like when is memory care necessary? Like, does everybody who has dementia have to go to memory care, or is there some measurements that say, okay, this is not
So that's a
appropriate?
great question, and the short answer is no. Anybody with dementia doesn't mean just because you have dementia doesn't mean you need to be in a memory care community. The big difference between most at the assisted memory care in Missouri at the assisted living level is going to be a separate access controlled community, usually within the same building as the assisted living community. They're going to have a little neighborhood that you punch a code to get in and out, and so there's access control there. There are a few places that are memory care only, so their whole building is locked like that. Most assisted livings, a lot of the assisted livings you can walk in and walk out at any time. Their doors are open from 9 in the morning till 6 at night or whatever time frame they have. So the things that says, the biggest thing that would say this person needs to be memory care versus assisted living is if they're going to be exit seeking. If there's somebody that we are worried that they're going to wander, they're going to walk out the front door and be walking down the street trying to get to wherever they think they want to get to. And if that's a risk, then if they're a flight risk or an elopement risk, however you want to say it, then that's somebody that should be in a memory care environment. If they're more advanced and they're struggling with and they need a lot of reminders, and memory care will provide more structure than what and this is what we're doing now, and not as opposed to assisted living is that we're going to do this. What you want to come for that? Even down to the there's some communities they have their meal times. So their restaurants for assisted living are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. People can just go whenever they're hungry, and when they can sit down, they order their food, and then they get what they want. They order up a menu. In the same building, in their memory care place, they eat breakfast at 8 o'clock. They have structured lunches from 11:30 to 1 or whatever the times are. The times are not important, but there are specific set times where they sit down and they eat. And that is because the structure is important to people. For at that level, they want to have the structure to keep them kind of going throughout their day and not, kind of having, making some of their symptoms worse.
I also think, one of the differences you hope to find in memory care versus assisted living or long-term care or independent living is that you would also hope that the staff were more specifically trained on working with people who do have dementia, because that makes a huge difference in the quality of life and experience and the honestly, like the ability of the person with dementia to even participate in their daily life. All of that really comes down to the knowledge of the staff and how well they understand to handle different situations. So I feel like, is that something that from your perspective, when you as a senior living advisor, when you're going and you're looking at memory care communities, maybe it's the first time you've been there, is that something that you ask about? Do you
It
ask about
is,
staff
and
training?
try to understand, when the activities and one, understand if the people are aware and trained well enough to know how to redirect somebody and how to work with somebody that has dementia that may be having some issues. There's some places, a lot of times they'll have quiet rooms and stuff like that when it gets too overwhelming and it's kind of sensory overload. Making sure that everybody that's working in the memory care community part is going to be trained on working with people with dementia. They're going to have that specific level of training. And then, some places are, they take it, the places that are, more focused specifically on memory care are going to, take things a little to that one step further, where they're much more, I think there's a sense of purpose more to what they do, even in their activities and on a daily thing. They want to get that structure and purpose to built into their day-to-day activities to help people live their best life possible. And purpose is it's a pretty underutilized word, I think, overall in this having a sense of purpose, because that's important for all of us. We need to have that. And just because you have dementia doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have to have a sense of purpose. Even if it's just you're going and they're baking cakes one day and you're the one that you're mixing something up, or you're doing something, you're helping, with the measurements. If you're part of it and you're doing something, then that can be, that makes people feel that they have that sense of purpose. And it's important to build that into what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis, rather than just, we're going to do some activities to pass the time away. So there's a difference between that overall.
I feel like, the topic of memory care is another really good example of just why it makes so much sense to have people be in the right fit with the community that they're with, as opposed for, I think sometimes the drive is like to go for the lowest level of care possible so that it feels like someone is still more independent. But the fact is, when people aren't in an environment that provides the right level of support, they're going to underperform compared with what they're capable of doing, right? I think memory care is a really good example of saying, like, okay, well, maybe mom or dad could get by in assisted living, but if they do have dementia and memory care, maybe memory care might actually be more appropriate, even if they're not wandering yet. And of course, this is an individual
It is very individual. A lot of times what I will do, and one of the things that we do is we didn't talk about it earlier, we do that assessment and send the referrals. We don't stop there. We set up all the tours, and we tour. We're with the families when we do all the tours, so we're accompanying them as we go around. And when it's not uncommon at all to have somebody that is kind of on that border, kind of a little bit between assisted living and memory care. And what I'll typically do is we'll tour both. And while we want to look at the community, what I usually tell the families, a lot of times the adult children, look at the residents and just kind of observe the other residents. Does your mom or dad, do they fit in better with group A of people or group B? And in a lot of cases, if I like to see people, be in a situation, we always want them to get the care that they need. We want to make sure that they get the right level of care. But, from a, personality standpoint or a mental health standpoint, I would rather see people kind of have to we don't ever want them to lose their dignity or feel that they can't do something because they feel embarrassed. But we also want them to feel a little bit of challenge. If everybody else is around you is nonverbal and not really able to have conversations with you, maybe people are going to have a tendency to kind of decline to that level quicker. And
the thing you just described is
assisted living, as long as they're meeting their care needs and they're not put in a situation where their dignity is compromised or they're feeling embarrassed or in any way, or they're feeling, the world is closing in on them by being there. I mean, if they're going there and they're repeating the same stories to different people every day, I mean, that's fine. Just as long as they're having a conversation and they're enjoying the important thing is to see them enjoy their life and live their lives to the fullest, and however that will be. And it's going to be different for every person, but we want to see that we want them to get the right care, but not necessarily, that might not always be the most care, I guess I would say.
That's a concept that we talk about in occupational therapy world, actually, as the just right challenge. And so like we use it all the time in life. I feel like as far as like learning, you want to make sure that you're doing just a hard enough thing that you don't feel discouraged by doing it, but you are still learning something new. And the same applies here, because like you want the people around you to be, kind of at the same level of what you're doing, or maybe bring you up a little bit as opposed to bring it down a little bit. And so that makes it probably a challenge to get connected to the right place, but makes it even more evident why being thoughtful about this, and then also like doing as much in advance as you can, so it's not like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we got to do this thing now. We've already thought through this thing, and now we're ready to enact it.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to that in a lot of places that we were going to look at, they have both, right? When you're not sure about assisted living or memory care, they're going to have both, and know that if things progress further, or when they progress further, the ability to transition from one level into a higher level if it's needed is there. And so you're not overcommitting initially and putting somebody in a situation where they are just, they're not getting the mental stimulation that you'd hope they would get in an overall in assisted living.
So everything you have said has been important and serious, but what I want to know is, what is the most interesting thing that you have seen a senior living community do as like an activity? Because I think that's one of the most awesome things about it, is that there's people putting on activities and stuff all the time. And so you get an opportunity to get out and move and do stuff. And I know people are creative. So what is the most interesting thing you've seen?
Well, let's see. There's a guy here locally. I think he's either in Raymore or Lee Summit, somewhere here in Missouri, but he's got like miniature ponies. And so
nice.
I've seen pictures where they're bringing the miniature ponies into senior living communities and give them a chance to come in, and the residents, having a chance to interact with the ponies. That's always pretty cool. Animals will always, bring a smile to people's faces. One of the things I like the best about a lot of places is, the activities coordinators are very. It's not that, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what we do. We do the same things. They are very much, we want to talk to people and see what they want to do. And, one of the residents I placed, he had Parkinson's, but he was prior to that, he'd been an avid golfer, and he really couldn't do much anymore, but they could do a little bit, try to hit a ball a little bit, but they took the residents, they showed up. I saw pictures and videos of them going to Top Golf. And
nice.
Just taking them all out, and you wouldn't think that would be but for him, I'm sure that was the highlight of the week, kind of thing, to get out for that.
Golf is such a good adaptive activity, because it's golf, but it's in one spot. You don't got to walk a long way.
Walk a whole lot. You can do something, but It's not the whole thing, but it's pretty darn close to, and it's fun too.
Yeah, and it's
Go
fun.
there, you can get food and drinks and stuff like that, and have some fun and laughs, and so that was pretty. I mean, I was seeing that was pretty interesting, and
I've
just
never written an aging in place plan that included miniature ponies. I'm just saying. So,
what's
I
that?
mean, I've never written an aging in place plan that included miniature ponies. So there,
Yeah, no,
if we're going
No, me
between
neither.
staying at home and going, I mean, if you're into that, that might
yeah,
be
no,
the
that was
tipping
pretty.
point.
It's pretty neat. You go around, you see they've got these. They got the costumes on these things, and they're all there. And residents just love. They're just eating them up. They're just little things. They're only like 3 feet high or something like that. But they're kind of cool. So I guess that's a couple that I thought were pretty interesting. But I mean, they're all doing a lot of things, and the ones that I like the most are when the activities coordinators are actively looking for the things that are the most interesting to each individual. And chances are,
Mm,
if one resident likes to go and they want to go to a museum, there's going to be 3 other residents that would love to go to that too, right? You just got to ask, be vocal, and say what you like, and you know, activity. They'll figure out how to make it happen. Um, the Royals, the Royals are pretty good about giving out tickets for people to come, and seniors to come and see the games. Unfortunately, sometimes they're, early on, it's only June and they're already giving out tickets. But hey, it's sometimes
there's
there's good
reasons
news
that
too.
the
And don't
Royals
give
are
out
giving
some
out tickets.
That's right. It kind of depends on how well they're doing, I guess.
I
But
know. Well,
they're pretty good about figuring out ways of getting people out to the ballpark, because that's certainly, it was, um, America's pastime as well.
absolutely. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time on the podcast. I want to give you opportunity though. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for any of our listeners, or is there good ways for them to connect with you if they're in the Kansas City area?
Well, I mean, easy way to connect to me, I guess, it just, there's to any Care Patrol representative, carepatrol.com, and you can, in the top right of our website, there's a little link to set your location, and you can find the people that are in the right area to help you. Um, Care Patrol is a franchise. We have a tried and true system to help people find the right places. But and we certainly will. Everybody's a little different. They all go through things a little bit differently. We're not all robots or anything, but we know, and the passion and the compassion are all there to help people find, and just try not to do it alone. There's the internet is a wonderful thing. Google is a wonderful thing, but there's a lot of misinformation, missing information, and too much information sometimes available when you're trying to weed through something. It's a very big life decision and very stressful. I think what I would like to, I mean, one of the things you talked about earlier, you guys are trying to, you're trying to help people stay in age in place in their homes. And I appreciate that. And I think, I just want to kind of say that, placement agencies, we're not there to try to push people into assisted living, try to push people on the way. We're trying to, or into any senior living. We're there to help people. Our number one job is help people understand their options, and a lot of times their options are to stay at home. And I appreciate, obviously I've worked with you quite a lot to try to find, sometimes just a little bit of help to stay at home is often going to be the best thing. And so we just want to be there when it's no longer safe or appropriate for somebody to stay at home. We want to be there to help along that way. So if people are thinking it's, kind of getting beyond the time where they should be, being where people can really realistically be safe at home, then we're ready to help at any time. And, our services are free. So there's no charge, no cost to learning more about those options that I mentioned.
I love that because options are important to me, and I try to give them to people as often as is possible. And so that's really the whole reason for Care Lab. It's an opportunity to understand what all the options are as far as care is concerned. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on with us today. And we'll make sure to link to Care Patrol in the show notes so you can find the one closest to you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today, Ron. Guys, if you are enjoying Care Lab, please make sure that you are liking the episode, that you are subscribing wherever you're listening or watching so that you can make sure to get updated when the next episode drops. Ron, thank you so much for being here. You're awesome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Nice to meet you.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.